YouTube randomly recommended me a video with a headline that said Hasim Rahman Jr. talks trash to Jake Paul. At first, I thought it was the former world heavyweight champion Hasim Rahman. I thought that only because Jake Paul has a history of fighting these guys who are over the hill, way past their prime, in their 40s or late 30s. So he always picks guys who are way past his prime, and I thought, well, this is central casting for a Jake Paul fight, picking a guy who's way past his prime. And then I double checked and said I saw it say Hasim Rahman Jr. And I was like, yeah, okay. So apparently Hasim Rahman had his son, and that's the guy Jake Paul is fighting. But I want to do a little background on Hasim Rahman first, who he is. Well, his father, who his father was. Hasim Rahman Sr. was once a heavyweight world champion. I wouldn't say he was a great boxer, even though he won the heavyweight championship once. The fight where he won was kind of like a, well, I won't say kind of like, it was actually a fluke win against Lennox Lewis. He knocked out Lennox Lewis unexpectedly. No one expected it. It was a huge upset at the time and one of the greatest upsets in boxing history. I was thrilled at the time because I hated Lennox Lewis. I was pro America, just being an American. I had American pride, and it felt good to see an American have the belt again way back at the time because Lennox, he had talked so much shit and so much trash about being the greatest, and I guess I was just annoyed. I hated his British accent, and just seeing him take out Mike and Evander Holyfield was frustrating. It was frustrating to see him take out both of those guys at that time. So that's why I remember Robin so much because I was thrilled when he knocked out Lennox Lewis. Unfortunately, in a rematch, he didn't win against Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis proved it was a fluke, and he destroyed Rahman. I think knocking him out in 4 or 5 rounds. I don't remember precisely, but I remember Lennox Lewis knocking him out pretty bad at the time. So that's what I remember about his father. Apparently, his son, Hasim Rahman Jr., is now in the boxing circuit. I looked at his record, and I think it was 12-1. I'm just going to pull it up here on Wikipedia just to get confirmation. Let me just pull it up. Hasim Rahman. So, brings up his father. Let me see if I can find the son. I just found him a minute ago. If I can just find his name again. Let me just give me another second or two to pull it up. Okay, I found it. Hasim Rahman Jr. So it says here he's 12-1 all time so far. So he hasn't had that many boxing matches. He's also not really young. He's fairly young at 31, so I'll still say he's in his prime. So I'll give him that. But he hasn't been in many fights in his career. It says right here he first started in April of 2017. That was his first fight. At that time, he would have been around 26, close to it at that time when I look at his birthday. So he's been fighting for about 5 years now, and he has a great record. He's 12-1. The last fight he fought, he actually lost in a knockout to a guy named Kenzie Morrison. I find this interesting because Kenzie Morrison is actually the son of Tony Morrison, who played Tommy Gunn in Rocky Five. So a little interesting trivia for you there. When I look at Hasim Rahman Jr., I also see that he's listed at 6'3", which is which is interesting because Jake Paul normally picks these undersized boxers who are not as tall as him. He has at least a few inches on them. They're usually around like 5'9" to 5'11", and I think Jake Paul is a legit 6'1", so he's always had the height on the boxers he's fought. This would be the first guy he fights that he's actually not towering over. It's the opposite. So you would think that Jake Paul is probably in some trouble. I think logically it would be fair to say that he's in trouble because he's an amateur boxer. This guy, Rahman Jr., looks like he's a legit boxer. I wouldn't say great because he hasn't really made a name for himself these last several years, but I could be wrong. Some of you boxing experts can correct me on this. But it looks like it will be an interesting fight. I'm not going to watch it though. I'm not invested in watching it because one thing I've noticed in these fights of these Paul brothers that it doesn't live up to what you expect. And let's be honest, no one likes the Paul brothers. They're trolls. Their audience watches them just to see them fail essentially in these matches. That's the whole reason why they're watching it. I know some people say they have fans, but I feel the majority of people just can't stand them because they're trolls. So they have the history of trolling. And the only reason I bring this up is that I feel sometimes their fights are suspect. I would say I would say the last fight between Logan Paul and Floyd Mayweather just didn't seem legit to me. Floyd Mayweather couldn't knock him out and didn't do much damage to Logan Paul, which to me seems strange. And it also made me believe that they had a wink wink deal before the fight, in the sense that basically Logan Paul was like, well, I don't stand a chance against you, so don't dust me up too bad. Just spare me, obviously you'll win, get a few hits on me, but don't try to kill me type of deal. It's just, to me, it was just hard to imagine that Floyd couldn't knock him out. Even though Floyd's a defense boxer, he has plenty of knockouts on his record. This is equivalent to basically LeBron James at 40 just beating some random kid on the streets by only like 5 or 6 points in a pickup game. It's just not believable. Even at age 40, a guy like LeBron would be able to beat just an amateur kid on the streets who isn't a professional basketball player, just who's 18 or 19, simply because he has more experience and he's professional and the kid isn't. And I apply that to boxing. It just didn't make any sense when Floyd Mayweather couldn't knock up Logan Paul. So I kind of wonder if Jake Paul has a wink wink deal with Hasim Rahman not to rough him up too badly, give him a few hits, give him a few cuts and bruises, but make sure he's not knocked out or bloodied. That's what I suspect could be going on. I do think, Hasim Rahman should win this fight. He's experienced from what I've looked at his record. However, you just never know the way these things play out. Who knows? Maybe Hasim takes a fall for Jake Paul. Maybe he's paid behind closed doors. I know I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I don't take any of these fights with the Paul brothers seriously. I don't know why, but to me, they just don't seem like they have much legitimacy. I'll give the Paul brothers this. They're great promoters. They know a lot of people despise them, so they'll tune into this spectacle. For me, I'm not going to tune into the spectacle. I just have no invested interest in seeing it. If they get knocked out, someone will put it on YouTube. Well, I won't say they. If Jake Paul gets knocked out by Hasim, I'm sure someone will put it on YouTube for all us to view. Plus, plus Jake Paul has so many haters, so there'll be plenty of videos all over the internet of him getting his ass knocked out. But however, I don't think it'll happen. Not because I think Jake Paul's a great fighter. I just think Hasim will spare him. I just feel they have a wink wink deal. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. For those of you who want to know when this fight is scheduled for, it is scheduled for August 6th, 2022. That's when the fight will be scheduled. Obviously, I'm assuming it's on pay per view or Showtime or something like that. So you'll have to pay for it, but you can always do illegal streaming. It's pretty easy to access. So yeah, tell me what you guys think, and I appreciate your views. Thank you so much.